Super Bowl champions.
Swinging a miss, struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup. The Flyers win the Stanley Cup for the lead. Yes!
Iverson, wow, what a fake off Daniels as he broke his ankles and got all the way to the cup.
Hey, welcome in. It's a beautiful Sunday, Memorial Day, but today we're drunk on the Fightins, man. Eric, it's good to touch base with you, brother. How we doing?
Good, man. Good. Definitely riding a little bit of a high here, coming off of 2 wins in Atlanta there. So good thing, because if this was a couple days ago, I don't know if I've had the same feeling.
I was going to say, so we tried to connect, little last minute something last weekend, and it just didn't work out. Probably a good thing, because at the time, things did not look pretty.
Yeah.
And, that kind of lingered into the week, man. And we can just jump right into it, right? They go out west, that West Coast trip where they go to Colorado, San Fran, and they start off with 2 wins, and then, God, they rattle off 5 straight losses. Talk to me about where you were when they were coming back playing the Cubs.
So, the starting pitching, I think, was just abysmal. The offense was just so inconsistent. It was just like, it was frustrating to watch a game. There's always teams, I feel like in years past, and it was the same thing kind of with the postseason run last year, where it's like you kind of feel like a team is never out of it. I just felt like once they got down like 3 runs, they're done. It's like you could pretty much turn this off. They're not coming back. There was no spark in the lineup. You figured the pitching wasn't gonna hold on. And it's kind of the ebbs and flows of baseball, and you're gonna see it happen.
Mm-hmm.
But man, when you're in one of those down periods, it is brutal and it is frustrating.
Yeah, and listen, that West Coast trip for me hit like just at the right spot, because the Sunday you're coming off the Sunday loss with the Sixers. And God, I just about checked out of sports completely. So the fact that they were on the West Coast and the games were coming on at 10 kind of gave me a little break, because I was like, I can barely, at this point, like barely staying up to watch the start of the game. So trying to catch up with the highlights and stuff in the morning. God, just frustrating the way that they were losing games. The fact that they got swept in San Fran, and you think, they're coming back and playing the Cubs and the Diamondbacks. So like, all right, there are 2 series where you're playing at home. You can get right. God, and they just that first game back where they lose 10-1, just it didn't make you feel any better. But then they take the next 2 games from the Cubs, right? But then the Diamondback series comes in, and you drop 2 or 3 from them. Like, I know the D-backs are an up and coming team. I know they got a lot of young talent. But if you're in the position that you're in, man, you gotta take advantage of those series, especially games at home.
Yeah, totally. And those 2 against the Diamondbacks, those first 2 games, again, just frustrating, miserable baseball. And really, even the walk-off win was not fun to watch for the first 6-7 innings. I actually was actually at the game, and I'll tell you, it was absolutely. I was there Tuesday night too, and it was actually just like a dead feeling in the crowd. But then I'll tell you, that 8th, 9th, and 10th inning, the whole stadium totally changed, and you finally started seeing like some fight and some life in that team. And it's one of those things, who knows if it's a spark plug, because then they came out and didn't play great in the first game in Atlanta, but you got to wonder if kind of getting that feeling might spark something with the team. Who knows? But yeah, hopefully we start seeing some more consistency, and we don't have to go through those mires again.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I was down at a game earlier this year, kind of very similar, where nothing. Do you remember the game with Castellanos? Is like down, like going pretty much like 3/4 of the way down the third base line in the 9th inning.
Yes.
So they end up, coming back, and so nothing happened during that game until the bottom of the 9th.
Yep.
So very, the thing that frustrated me, especially, with this game, the game one in Atlanta, is that you did put up runs. Like you did have productive innings.
Mhm.
And I gotta say that, like, if you're gonna put up 5 runs, the guy who is, whether you identify him as the 1 or the 2 or the ace or not the ace or whatever, but Aaron Nola has to be a guy that is a stopgap every once in a while. And it just seemed like whenever the Phillies scored runs, he gave them right back. And that was the most frustrating part about that game in particular.
Yeah, it really was. Because like you said, the offense actually was, they were putting up runs. Nola give up a run, they get it right back. But the problem was Nola just couldn't be that stopgap, and he's struggled to be that all season. Really, I was kind of expecting a lot more from him this year, especially being a big contract year for him.
Right.
I know a lot of people are down on him right now, and it's not been a good start to the season. But you just kind of look at starting pitching in baseball, and there is not a ton of it out there. I was actually reading an article this morning from Todd Zalecki.
Okay.
Dave Dombrowski was saying, teams are actually calling the Phillies about starting pitching, and the Phillies need starting pitching. It's such a thin market right now. So it's like, while Nola, isn't performing, what we were expecting, or to that ace level, even if he's performing like this and you just lower the expectations, he's still a solid, 3 or 4 starter in a few years, probably, just given the landscape of the starting pitching market right now. I have to imagine he starts to come out of it a little bit. Like he's too good of a pitcher to be like this. And he's been consistent for I shouldn't say consistent, but his numbers at the end of a year are pretty consistent, right? He's a workhorse, 200 plus innings, the last like 3 or 4 seasons. His ERA is always going to be a little higher because he does give up that home run ball. So you're going to be looking at a 3.5 to 4 ERA somewhere probably. But, he's just got to figure out how to limit that damage right now, because you need him and Wheeler, who very pleasant outing yesterday from him. But you need to kind of ride behind those guys, because Suarez is probably still shaking off some rust. He hasn't looked good in his first few starts. But he's really only made 3 appearances this year, so it's been he's probably still kind of shaking off some of that rust. But I don't know. Nola's got to figure it out, because we're not going to make a run if we're just relying on Zach Wheeler here.
No, and it's almost like a comedy of errors. Like the fact that other teams are calling the Phillies for pitching, and the Phillies also need pitching. I mean, God, it's hard to even think, and it's almost too early in the season to start beginning to think of like, who are the guys that are available, because the standings really have not, like, they really won't shake themselves out. I got to believe Miami comes back down to life, right? And, if you take that game tonight, the game that's going to come on tonight at 7:00 on ESPN, you've essentially, you shaved 3 games off of that, by taking 3 out of 4. You're going to put yourself, again, early on within earshot of the Braves. And that to me has to be the goal, because you cannot put yourself in a position where you're battling the rest of the National League. Because if you're going to let the Braves kind of run away and hide with this, then you're essentially, now you're battling the Diamondbacks, the Pirates, the Padres, you're battling the rest of the teams in the National League, and you don't want to be in a position where you're battling teams that are younger, faster, more athletic, because the team that this lineup has talent that you can't argue with the talent on paper, right? But it has to start translating at some point. I gotta believe that the Trey Turner that we're seeing now is not the same Trey Turner we're going to see in June and July. I would like to see him start to run the bases more, be more aggressive on the base pad. It's something that he did in LA and he did in DC that for some reason at the start of the season he's not doing now, and I can't really put my finger on why. But the production that you're getting from Castellanos is great. Schwarber out at this point is struggling, but I got to admit,
We got 3 days till June. I'm holding out till June.
Listen, I'm sure that Wawa has the Schwarberfest campaign like all ready to drop at midnight on June 1st. And I'm right there with you. I really think that this lineup it could be a combination of a couple things, right? You insert Trey Turner, you're essentially inserting Bryce Harper. You're this facaded, like little stagnant introduction into the lineup minus Reese Hoskins, right? You pull Reese Hoskins out. So I gotta think that the amount of talent that they have in this lineup, when the weather starts to turn, right, it's gonna be, it's gonna start getting really warm. I gotta think that this lineup starts to hit the way that a lineup that's supposed to be in this ballpark hits, which is for power.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. They're going to start coming together. Turner's too good of a player to stay how he is, and actually, he hasn't looked great, but there's been some signs, right? Obviously, the home run the other day was huge, and in the last 2 nights, he's hit doubles to the opposite field, and I feel like when you start going the other way with the ball, that's always a good sign. So I'm thinking, we might be on the doorstep of seeing Trey Turner, picking it up offensively a little bit here, which then will get him on base more. And then hopefully, to your point that you made a little bit ago, we'll start seeing him, his speed on the bases then. Because that's a huge asset that I think, you look at him with the bat in his hands, and that's one thing, obviously, but what he can do on the base pass is something not many other players in the league can. So that'll be exciting once we start seeing him get on there a little bit. But the other point you made, Hoskins, you're seeing it. The lineup is without a doubt missing him. And I know, people would hate on Hoskins because he'll have those horrible, horrible cold streaks, but he also has those torrent hot streaks too. And he's just another power bat in that lineup that pitchers have to worry about because he's always a threat to knock one out. So definitely missing him there. And, we're not really seeing that much power coming in from other parts, right? Like Bohm has shown some kind of weird flashes of it, right? Like he started off the season crushing the ball. Then he was kind of hitting all those slap singles again, or the doubles, and now he's hit. He hit that monster one the other night in Atlanta, which is good seeing him drive it like that because you're gonna, especially if he's gonna be playing some time at first base here, you need home run production out of that position. Cody Clemens has filled in admirably. Nothing against Cody here, but he's not going to be a 20 home run guy for you. So, and you need at least 20 to 25 from your first base position, I feel like. So, it's one of those things where you're going to start seeing, Derek Hall, who I'm still, undecided on, and Christian Pache are making their rehab appearances, I think, next week in Clearwater. So might be able to inject something into the lineup there. We'll see what happens. But again, it's, Hall has the power, but is he going to be consistent enough to do it on an everyday basis? That's kind of, remaining to be seen.
That to me is kind of where this lineup needs to kind of shake itself out, right? As soon as you start getting those guys back and, and the other guy, we obviously got to touch on, the Harper, that insertion of his leadership, power, ability to get on base, right? Inserting, a guy who has been playing at MVP caliber for a couple seasons. The fact that at some point, I heard them talking about his essentially, the rehab that he's kind of doing, pregame in terms of throwing, is now getting to the point where he's throwing 90 feet, that he's stretching his arm out, that I got to imagine at some point you're going to see him at first base. So again, anytime you're putting him and you're able to take a guy like Cody Clemens, who again is filling in admirably, but if you had told me that he was going to have played 23 games at this point, I would have been like, we are fucked. Like we got nothing. Like what are we doing? So, but he's played well. I mean, he's got, in those 23 games, right? He's got 10 RBIs and 4 home runs. So all things considered, considering that you didn't think he was going to play as much, you're getting production out of that guy. So, but I think you insert Harper into that spot, that lineup becomes exponentially stronger because now you're not you're able to now kind of like flex that DH spot, so you can spread that DH spot around. Whether you give Real Muto a day off, whether you give Castellanos or Schwarber, one of those guys, a day off. I think that's where this lineup has to turn, because I think you're not going to see Bryce Harper in the outfield this year. It seems to me like he's going to kind of spend the year rehabbing, like going through and strengthening his arm so that next year he goes back to the outfield, and then Castellanos slots in a better spot that's better for him. I'm looking at where this lineup could be when these guys are getting healthy. If Derek Hall comes back, he's another guy you can put in first base. I think the thing that I'm worried about is that you're constantly going to be chasing the replacement of Rhys Hoskins.
Yeah, and again, it's another position. We were talking about starting pitching earlier, and I think even first base is a pretty tough, thin position right now to replace, especially Hoskins, who has been consistently inconsistent for the last few years, but what you're getting from him, right? Like, right. You're going to get between 20 and 30 home runs. You're going to get 80 to 90 RBIs or so. And it is tough to replace that. But yeah, and everything I'm reading, it sounds like, Harper is making strides. It looks like maybe by the middle or end of June, we could start seeing him at first base. And I think I actually read something on The Athletic the other day where they're actually targeting sometime maybe after the All-Star break to see if he actually can play right field at all this year.
Ooh, okay.
So if that's a possibility, that's huge too. But the point you made about flexing that DH spot is absolutely massive, because right now, that's you got to keep Harper in the lineup because he's hitting the ball consistently.
Right.
But I think a big thing is, getting Schwarber out of the outfield every now and then. I love his bat, but left field is looking a little rough right now this year.
It's definitely it's a mystery bag every time he's out there. And that's, you hate to put yourself in a position where a guy who gives you as much as he does offensively can cost you games defensively.
Yeah, and I feel like last year, he didn't make. He's never going to be a good defensive player. Like, he'll tell you that. He was kind of mentioning it on that in-game interview they did on ESPN back in the beginning of the season. But it's one of those things where I feel like last year I don't remember his defense hurting as much as it kind of does now. I mean, his range is next to nothing. So there's balls that other outfielders may actually have a chance to get to, where it doesn't look like he's making a bad play, but he's just not getting to anything because he can't cover that much ground. So I think getting him, he's not the worst, but getting him out of left field occasionally and just keeping his bat in the lineup will be big. And even just giving, like you said, like giving guys like Castellanos a day off in the field, or giving Realmuto some time off behind the plate is going to be big too. But so we'll see. I think it's going to be interesting to see, because Harper's never played first base. Now, if there's a guy who I trust to pretty much learn to do anything, it would be him. So I know he's been putting in work. And it's not just the picking, but it's also like the footwork and where to cut off, where to throw a ball, all that stuff. So I know he's been working mostly on just really like the thinking part of being a first baseman. So it'll be interesting to see what he does there, but I'm excited to see him be more viable.
I think, like you said, like a guy, if there's a guy on this roster that I would trust, is a guy like Bryce Harper, because he's been dialed in on baseball since he could pick up a ball. Mm-hmm. And I got to imagine, with as talented as he was as a kid growing up, I got to imagine he's played. I know at one point, I believe in his amateur days he caught a little bit.
He did catch, yeah.
So the athleticism is there. And I think the fact that he is as knowledgeable as he is in terms of how dialed in he is on baseball in general, it's probably more just logistical stuff. Where do I have to be? Where am I at with the cutoff? Where am I at on the relay? What's my footwork like with the, on first base, if I'm holding a guy on, and all those things are all baseball things. It's not necessarily things that I think you have to think about. I think those are intrinsically things that you are familiar with. You just have to become more familiar with.
Yeah, he's just such a baseball guy. Like, I mean, he's a player who I think just loves the game so much. Whether it's playing it, like he respects the history of it and everything. So yeah, I trust him to do everything. And he's probably going to make some dumb plays when he first starts doing it, but it's just one of those things. You got to be patient and and hope it works out until he's able to get back out there in right field.
I love it. I love it. Well, listen. We can transition to a little pitching conversation. Talk to me about, you had a piece come out where you were looking at the Gregory Soto deal. Talk to me about where kind of your analysis of what the Phillies have in that trade and then what they gave up.
So Soto was one of those guys who, I always kind of looked at last year. I think if you looked at his numbers, they were a little bit inflated playing against Detroit. I think his record was real. He had a lot of losses, but he also played in Detroit. But he just has really nasty stuff. Like, I think it's comparable actually to Jose Alvarado in a way, like just, that really hard, that fastball, that he can, but it's command. And it was really the same thing that happened with Alvarado too. But when we made that trade, I remember just thinking, I'm like, all right, cool. Because we had signed Kimbrel, I believe, a couple of weeks before the trade. We already had Dominguez, we already had Alvarado. And I'm thinking, all right, Soto, we now have 4 awesome guys that we can rely on in the back end of this bullpen. And now I know starting off game 1, Soto looked at, people were like, uh-oh, is this guy, because I don't think he got an out and he gave up like 3 or 4 earned runs.
Right.
His ERA right now is really inflated. It's 5 something. But he's pitched, I think, in 25 games. In 3 of those, in 3 or 4 of those games, he's given up multi-run innings. And in 1 game, he's given up 1-run inning. Other than that, the guy has been lights out. So, I mean, in 80% of his appearances, the guy hasn't given up a run, and he's looked absolutely dominant at times. But it all boils down to control. So if you can get that control down, you basically have 2 Jose Alvarados in your bullpen, which is no team has that. Cody Clemens was a throw-in the deal, and we talked about him a little bit ago. He's had more of an impact than I think anyone thought. Giving up, I know people loved Vierling and loved Maton. Their personalities were great, part of the whole daycare thing and everything. But realistically, you got to kind of separate, your mind from your heart there a little bit, because the trade was smart. I mean, getting a guy like Soto in the bullpen is totally worth giving up 2 guys who are probably not going to see much playing time for the Phillies this year. Maton basically is kind of Cody Clemens to me. Vierling can give you some. Yeah, I feel like they're pretty much the same. Not a ton of power, can play, a couple different infield positions. And then you have Vierling, who was basically, going to take some time off of Marsh, but he's, hitting lefties and righties, so you don't really need that right now. So, I mean, I think it worked out well for the Phillies in the fact they get another dominant left-handed reliever. It also works out for Vierling and Maton because now they're seeing regular time in Detroit to, allow them to continue to develop. So I think it was, a good trade for the Phillies in terms of, making their team better. And I think it was a good trade for, players that went to the Tigers, because now they're getting able to actually, play full time and see what they can do on the baseball field.
Yeah, listen, I'm kind of right there with you. I think the production, like to get a guy like Gregory, to get a guy like Gregory Soto, to be able to put him in the back end of this bullpen, right? I think we were all saying at the beginning of the year, you got guys that can just be gas cans in the back of that bullpen. And when push comes to shove, you're going to need those guys to get you to push towards the playoffs, push through the playoffs. And I would probably argue that you had a guy like that, Jose Alvarado, but you almost overused him last year in the playoffs because you didn't have enough of those guys. So I think from a baseball move, it's a smart baseball move for Dombrowski to bring in a guy like that to add to the, you bring in Kimbrel, you bring in Soto, you add them to Alvarado. You have guys at the back end of this bullpen where you can give guys nights off, and comparable to what you gave up. I mean, you gave up guys that are at the back end of your, the back end of your roster, guys that were not going to be neither one of those guys were going to be everyday starters. The guy that you get back in return, Cody Clemens, was essentially a throw-in. And what the production that you're getting from Christian Pache early on in the season before he gets hurt is comparable to what you were getting from Matt Vierling. So, and you basically got him for nothing too.
Got him for nothing, yeah.
So, to me, on many levels, it kind of worked out for everybody because you have these guys that are now all in different spots, but they're all spots that are better for them because they're all getting better opportunities. So it's kind of a situation where kind of everybody won.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And when it's funny seeing interactions on Twitter and everything, because when Soto has one of those blow up innings, people are like, we never should have gotten rid of Vierling. I'm like, what would they have done to make this situation better? Like they weren't going to be playing the game. They weren't, he gave up runs. Okay. It's going to happen. Especially when you have a guy who can be erratic at times. But to your point that you made earlier, looking at the depth in this bullpen right now versus what we had last year, you couldn't trust a few guys in big spots. This year, I know Kimbrel struggled in the beginning of the year, but he's looked really good since he's gotten his velocity up. Dominguez has had kind of a weird season, I feel like. He's had some really, really dominant games, and he's had some where he kind of looks like, what's going on here? I think he'll figure it out, though. Again, his arm's just too electric for him to not be reliable. And Alvarado, the injury, I saw he was throwing the other day. He was supposed to throw a bullpen yesterday, had some soreness still in the arm. I'm kind of okay with not rushing him right now. The bullpen seems to be holding its own, and realistically, all you're doing is keeping him from throwing more innings than he needs to, right? Especially the way this bullpen has started out this year. I mean, these guys have thrown a ton of innings because the starting pitching is not really been doing its job for the most part. So I really think this bullpen, we're going to see a lot of, transitions, I guess, as we get through the summer here, because you're going to have guys like Brogdon's thrown a lot of innings. Strahm, starting out in the rotation, has already thrown more innings this year, I think, than he did, or close to the same amount of innings that he threw last year. So like, I don't want any of these guys to go on the IL, but unfortunately, it's the nature of the beast when you're overused, right? It's going to happen. So I think adding that guy like Soto is absolutely massive there.
Yeah, and at some point you're going to probably bring up, your young, super talented arms. At what point do you think that they begin to explore the option of inserting the young, talented guys that they've kind of touted as like the next wave of pitching talent?
So Abel and McGarry, is that who you're referring to there? Mm-hmm. So I've actually been really, especially with the way the starting pitching has been, I've been really following them closely over the last few weeks here and just following their starts. Abel seems he's still not quite ready. He has some really, really dominant innings, but then he has like a blow-up inning. For example, he just pitched on Friday night, and I think he went 4 2/3 innings. Through the first 4 innings, he had 9 strikeouts. Mm-hmm. Then he gave up 5 runs, I think, in the 5th inning to have to get pulled. He walked like 3 guys that inning or something like that. So he's another one. It's just control and limiting damage. But when he is there, his stuff is, and he's only 21, right? So he's still got some time. Like that's still, we're sitting here spoiled because we had Painter at 19 thinking he might be able to make the big league roster. But Abel is still really, really good. And he's 21. So that's still pretty young too. So he's still got a year or so, I would have to think, before they really consider bringing him up. Just because there's no sense in rushing the development, right? You see that where teams will rush guys sometimes, and it ruins their whole process there. McGarry, I think, is a lot closer. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him in whether it's bullpen or starting or maybe like an opener type role at some point later on this season if the need calls for it. He's another one, absolutely electric stuff, but control can be an issue sometimes again. And if he can figure that part of his game out, he's going to be really good. Because he just has nasty stuff. He's a little bit older. I think he's 23. So he's, I was gonna say he's out of the Painter, Abel, and McGarry. So McGarry is 23. So he's the oldest one out of that group. Right. Yeah. The old guy. But the old guy. So where are you at with Andrew Painter? Right. Because spring training hits, right. And it's pretty much everybody's thought that
he had potential to make the opening day roster. Obviously, the injury comes in right before the start of the season. And I think, obviously they handle this with insanely soft kid gloves. But do you envision a scenario, right, maybe down the stretch where the rosters expand, that if he's healthy, kind of in that Spencer Strider, kind of bring him up late, but add him to a rotation? Maybe at that point, maybe you expand the rotation. Maybe it's 6.
Yeah.
Maybe he's the opener. I think do you envision a scenario where he sees some legitimate time in the big leagues this year? Or do you think they kind of just, they kind of push it to 2024?
I do envision it. As of right now, everything I'm reading, Dombrowski keeps saying we plan on putting him in the rotation at some point. Now, again, they're going to be super careful, which is good. He's, again, he's 20 right now, so it's not like you're wasting any of his prime years here. So, but because he's throwing now, I still think we're a ways away. I think they're looking, sometime probably later in the summer, like end of July, maybe early August, which is good though, because that's going to limit his innings, right? And I think that's kind of what we were thinking about in the beginning of the year. It's like, okay, this guy's threw, I think, 101 innings last year in the minors, which is the most he's ever thrown in his life. So if he started the season in the rotation, it's like, okay, how do you limit this guy's innings? Well, it's it was an unfortunate scenario, but it kind of fixed itself there. But I do envision a spot where we see him, and even if they just say, hey, listen, we need you to go out and pitch 3 innings today, right? Like he can he can go all out. He's not sitting there trying to make it to the 6th inning or anything like that. Right. But just to get him some innings in the big leagues and just kind of help take some of the innings off these other guys, because it's a long season. These guys are going to be taxed at some point. So I speaking optimistically, I think we do see him later on this year in some capacity.
All right. So yesterday they win 2-1 against the Braves, right? But the star of the show is Zach Wheeler, right? Zach Wheeler has probably, obviously this year, probably one of his most dominant performances to date. What does that give you in terms of incentive to think about where that could be? Could he be turning a corner for this season?
Yeah, I think so. There was a couple things I looked at there. One, the strength of the lineup, right? The Braves lineup is good. I mean, you got some real big hitters in that lineup. So being able to sit that lineup down, 3 or 4 times was really impressive. The other thing I looked for was his velocity later in the game, because what was happening to him earlier in the season was he was throwing gas through like the first 3 or 4 innings. Mm-hmm. And then his fastball was dropping down to 93, 94. Wheeler's not going to, he needs to throw hard to get guys out. And last night or yesterday, I looked, and I think through the 7th inning, he was still touching 95, 96 on the radar gun, which is good to see, because he was not doing that before, which leads me to believe he might be getting over that postseason hangover thing a little bit, where his arm is finally kind of getting back to where it needs to be, because that was a really, really encouraging start from him yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like you said, for him to have the velocity that he had through 8 innings, he goes 8 innings, right? 1 walk, 12 strikeouts.
12 strikeouts. That was insane.
And 12 strikeouts for a lineup, right, that is really, really impressive, right? The top, even just the top 3 in that lineup, right? To have, you got Ronald Acuna, you got Matt Olson, you got Austin Riley, right? Then you got Marcell Ozuna later on in the lineup. You got Albies, Arce. They have bats all spread out all throughout that lineup. And, he gives up 3 hits. Mm-hmm. Just really, really impressive. And I feel like that was really encouraging, especially considering how important this series is. To be able to take 3 out of 4 from them really means a lot. And especially the way that if they can, put together a win today, it makes losing the first game of that series kind of softens the blow on that one a little bit. And it really gives you some momentum, going into New York to be able to take on another team that's ahead of you in the Mets.
Yeah. My goal going into the series was to take at least split it, right? Take it to, so we're there. If we win today, to me, that's a bonus. Winning a series against a really good team on the road is never easy. So at this point, I think obviously I want to win tonight, but if we don't, I feel like we did our job, right? We're not losing, we're not gaining ground, but we did what we needed to do. The Mets, I think, gave up 10 runs to the Rockies last night. So maybe maybe we'll be able to do something when we play them in New York, because that's a team I would just really like to win that series, and gain some ground on them as well. But yeah, I think they went in and did what they had to do these last two games, and even like you said, game one for the most part, like they didn't play a horrible game. It was really it was Nola, kind of ruined that one for them. So realistically, they've played well against the cream of the crop in the NL East right now. So that's somewhat encouraging considering some of the losses we've seen lately.
I love it, man. I love it. Anything else you want to touch on before we kind of jump out of here?
I think we touched on some of that stuff. There's one guy who's playing down in Lehigh Valley right now. Drew Ellis signed him as like a minor league free agent a couple years ago. Just won International League Player of the Week. He's been on an absolute tear. So I don't know if he plays like second and third base. I don't think we have a need for him right now, really, but just kind of a name to keep an ear out for, because he's maybe a depth piece at least. So could be something there. Dylan Covey tonight. See if he can go against Spencer Strider. He actually pitched well in the game that he needed to. So again, that was kind of one of those starting pitching things. It's like, oh, okay, well, the Phillies made a waiver claim. They got Dylan Covey. No one's really excited about it, but you know what? It's another depth move. So hopefully he can pitch at least somewhat respectably. But we'll see, because again, it's a tough lineup tonight. So we'll see.
And even Jake Cave is a guy who's kind of flashing at the AAA level too.
He's been killing it. Yeah.
So knowing that you have a little bit of depth in that position, that to me is where you might be able to flip some of those guys for maybe not some top end pitching talent, but maybe guys that could be depth pieces, guys that could be your 4, your 5 in your rotation, or could be another bullpen arm. To be able to flip those guys to maybe a team that needs position players on a team that may not be super successful right now. That's where Dombrowski, I feel like, can get really creative with the lineup and really creative with this roster, because you can kind of add those depth pieces without giving up super duper talent on the front, on the everyday roster.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a good thing to have. And it's kind of fun, especially when the Phillies were in one of those, struggling periods there. I was paying a lot of attention to the minor leagues, because I'm like, I needed some sort of thing to look forward to, or something to make me happy about this organization. So, but again, if we take 3 tonight, I'll be very happy about this organization. So
very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, before we jump out, right, it's Memorial Day, right? So, shout out to anybody that is, has any relation to anybody military, whether that's your family, friends, special thanks to anybody who's served in the military. It's the kickoff to summer. I know there's a lot of people down the shore. I know that the AC Expressway was pretty much a parking lot since Thursday.
I'm sure. Yeah.
What, anything summer plans, anything summer going on that you're excited about?
Nothing crazy, just a couple vacations on the shore, stuff like that. I'm really looking forward to seeing if the Phillies can make a run here. How about you? Anything going on this summer for you?
Besides the backyard pool, again, we got some vacations. Kind of, we'll hit the Jersey Shore. We'll try to go. Sometimes we might go down to some Delaware beaches for a little bit. Okay. But really looking to just take the summer to kind of just relax. We've had some construction at the house. We've had some stuff going on. So now that all that stuff is kind of waned, everything's settled, we're just trying to fire up the grill, crack a couple cold ones and just kind of just take it easy, man. So real quick, Bo, before we jump out,
Mhm.
We got something, network wide that we're kind of, we want to mention. So, if you are listening or you are joining, you're going down to the game, the Phillies game on June 24th. We got something going on that's super cool. We've partnered with the guys at the Drunk Phils Fans, right, and Carter Hart Media, the Bell Smashers, right. Those are all guys that we've worked with on our network. But they're doing a tailgate, the K-Lot tailgate, from 11 to 3. So, if you're going down to that game or you're going down to hang out at that game, should be a good time. It's kind of a BY whatever. It's a BYO. So if you want to bring food, great. You want to bring some beer, some booze, whatever, that's cool. You don't have to bring anything. You can just come hang out. It's should be a good time. So we're looking forward to, kind of, building a relationship with those guys and kind of meeting up with those guys. So if you're in and around the K-Lot on the 24th on Saturday, it's a 4:00 game, and I think they were referring to it as a fuck the Mets fuck the Mets tailgate. So
yeah, I know they're definitely playing the Mets that day, and I know I know Chris has not many nice things to say about them, so that should be a good time.
Should be a ton of fun, man. Philly, it's been a ton of fun. We'll look forward to checking in with you all later, but go enjoy get outside, go enjoy the solid weather, and we'll talk to you a little later. All right, please.
See.
Hey, listen to this guy. Tell me how you're feeling here. You're screaming.
I am stoked, baby.
You're screaming like it's still the game going on.
We're talking about the Fightins here. The Fightins. Said.
This is the Broad Street Line, where Philly sports fans leave all of their sports hot takes. Call 267-405-3062 and show us your passion for Philly sports. Don't forget to tune in every Wednesday at 8:30 when we listen to your live reactions to the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat.